for large companies like Edward Life Sciences, Bank of America, and so on. Currently, he is the Chief Information and Innovation Officer for ICANN. For those of you who are not from the technology background like me, essentially they control the domain names and the IP addresses. So, in a way you can say they are the gatekeepers for the internet. So I would like to invite him to come and talk to us and share some of his insights on his work and his experiences in innovating in different industries. Thank you, Mr. Ashwin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did everybody have a good cup of chai?
Yeah.
Or coffee? Or wake yourselves up? It's great. First of all, I want to thank Ashima. I think she deserves a big round of applause given the background that she Thank you. And it is a privilege to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. When Ashima reached out to me, I had to do the obligatory thing with a corporate entity like I belong to, where I asked of our people whether I could in fact be a speaker, and they were very gracious in saying absolutely, as long as you tell people what it is that ICANN does. So I want to start with three questions here, just to get people warmed up a bit. How many of you have heard of ICANN? Show of hands, please. Pretty good, about half the room. How many of you know exactly what ICANN does?
Exactly.
That's not bad at all.
Exactly.
How many of you use the internet in the last 24 hours? Show of hands, please. Cool, that's pretty cool. All right. So, Funny was partly right in saying that we are the people who control the addresses and control domains. We actually control nothing. Nobody can control the internet. But what we do is we regulate the internet. We are authorized to be the regulators of the internet. And that's because of a fiat that came down from the United States government when ARPANET, which is the precursor to the internet, was first invented. We were asked as a company to start keeping track of the IP addresses of computers that were getting connected. Now, if you think back, at some point in time, the first two computers were connected. And therefore somebody said, oh, we need to say this is A and that's B. And then they said, well, maybe numbers are better. And then they said, what happens if we get the 27th? Is it an alphabet? We can't create a new alphabet, so let's go with numbers. And that's how this company began. From that beginning, it became the keeper of IP addresses, and it also became the giver of what is known as top-level domain names. So .com is a domain name at the very top level. .net is a domain name at the very top level. Today you can buy new domain names if you want to invest $250,000. So the latest one that's catching everybody's fancy is .guru. So if you want to be known as a hotshot in a field, go register yourself with a domain with your name, .guru. And then people can send you a message saying, Venkat.guru for Taranki there in the back, for instance. So that's just an example of how this can work. There are lots of familiar faces and many friends in the audience, so I have to be careful about what I say so that my reputation is not tainted in the wrong direction. So I'm going to do the best that I can. I was asked to find out how best to go with this afternoon, so we can go one of two ways. I can either do a Q&A, or I have a formal presentation. I'd like to see a show of hands. Formal presentation, raise your hands, please. Okay. Q&A, raise your hands, please. Okay, we're split down the middle. I can't do two of them in 45 minutes, so I'm happy to take questions as I do my formal presentation. How's that? Yeah? Works for everybody? Okay, great. I want to start with a story here. How many of you have heard of Christopher Columbus? Good guy, right? Actually not. He's not a good guy. When he went back after first landing in the West Indies and started to spread the word that he had discovered the New World, there were many who disbelieved him. And some of the Spanish grandees invited him to dinner. The story goes that when he got to dinner, the Spanish nobleman actually wanted to put him down. So imagine being invited only to be insulted. They asked him, what if we could sail, we could also find this new world? What's the big deal? Nothing that you've done is a big deal, actually. So Christopher Columbus was a little upset, as would be anyone. He said, well, he looked around the table and found that everybody had a boiled egg placed next to them. He said, which of you can make this boiled egg stand on its end? So they all looked at him and said, what? He said, yeah, make it stand on its end. So they all picked up their eggs and tried to make it stand on its end. And of course, a boiled egg in its shell will not stand on its end. It'll tilt over. So they all looked at him and said, well, let's see you do that. So he picked it up. He banged it once. It cracked the shell. He placed it. It sat there. They said, that's not fair. He said, you know, when once you know how, that's exactly when it's fair. Until you don't know. That's innovation. That is innovation. That's thinking on your feet and innovation. I'm going to do something here which is all pictures. The next 25 slides are all pictures. But they tell 1,000 words, every one of them. So we'll go through them and I'll talk to them a little bit. I want to talk about innovation in health, which is one of 24 sectors that we see regularly in ICANN where there is enormous innovation. You know, others were talking about energy as a field in innovation. It's just one of 24 sectors where there is innovation going on. There is innovation in housing. There is innovation in water. There is innovation, believe it or not, in waste management. There is innovation in education. There's innovation in services. Health happens to be the one thing that we can all look at and say, you know what, I think I want a piece of that action. If you look at health, health is really a point of view. Oftentimes we look at innovation in health as being the cure to a disease condition. But isn't it the fact, do you want to operate this? Do you want me to do this?
I can help you if you want.
Okay, next slide, please. Would that work? Go back. Okay, next slide. Perfect. If you look at the green dots at the top, you start out by being well, and then you work your way around clockwise. You want to prevent disease, but sometimes you get into a disease situation that needs to be detected. It needs to be contained before it spreads, whatever it may be. It needs to be corrected. You need to be certified as being healthy again so that you're back to being well. Of course, next slide. If you're able to draw a line and prevent it, that's your true north, so that you never have to be detected with a disease condition. We spend a lot of time thinking about everything south of that line, and not enough time or effort thinking about being north of that line. It would be wonderful if a lot of our time, disproportionately, were about north of the line and less about south of the line. But in fact, we trust a lot of other things to help us through getting to the south of the line. Next slide, please. If you think about goals that we have, we want to have reasonable longevity. I don't think anyone in the room wants to live up to 1,000. We want to have affordable health care, knowing that some of us are going to get sick along the way. And most of all, we want to have good quality of life, no matter how long we live, whether it's for 10 years or 100 years. So what do we have going for us in the Innovators Toolkit? We've got 3 things going for us. 1 is global demographics. 2 is technology advancements. And 3 is a wellness marketplace. And I'll talk about all of them. Next slide, please. You know, if you zoom in, it's about individuals making decisions about wellness. Increasingly so, it's not about mass wellness, but about my wellness. Because my health is very different from everyone else's health in this room. So the question is, how do we innovate so that we can get to that state of my wellness? Next slide, please. So if you look at the three axes that I talked about, we'll talk about the global demographics first. The world is exploding in many different ways. If you think of the graph to the left, it's the world's population chart. You can see that we went from 100 million in population 2,000 years ago, when Christ was on this earth, to 7.5 billion as we speak. And that number is guaranteed to increase to beyond 9, but the forecasters don't quite know whether it'll taper off at 9 or whether it'll continue to increase. What we do know is that the rate of increase of population is beginning to decelerate. So in other words, the curve is bending, but we don't know whether the curve continues to go up. It may actually start to dip down. Remains to be seen. We thought, as a world, that education would be the real cause of the curve bending, but in the last 20 years, we're finding higher education and more kids in the same location at the same time, which is a very interesting phenomenon. The graph to the right is births and deaths per 1,000 per year. And if you look at that over a period of time, same kind of a demographic, pre-industrial all the way through to now, you see that populations go up, births and deaths go down. Very interesting. What does that say? That says that people live longer. And indeed that is the case. Next slide, please. People are living much longer no matter where you look, everywhere. Even in sub-Saharan Africa, people live longer today than they ever did. Next slide, please. In fact, this is how long people live. If you look at the chart, red shows people living for about 75 to 80 years. Sub-Saharan Africa, you find, is living up to the age of 55 and longer. So even the worst of places in terms of disease conditions is finding that there are cures making people capable of living longer. So the first of the three axes, reasonable longevity, is being taken care of. The question now becomes one of, do I have wellness care